Hey everybody, this is Texas State Representative Trey Martinez Fischer. Welcome to Politics. I hope I don't sound crazy or might look too bad. We were doing this episode without my producer, who is actually on a commitment for the 4th of July weekend, but we wanted to bring this show to you. I am talking today State Representative Gina Hinojosa. She's going to give us her perspective. We're going to talk about the role, which was very critical, the role she played in helping us break quorum. And again, we always welcome your thoughts, feedback, and suggestions. Please continue to follow us, subscribe to our podcast, follow us on social media at TMFTX on both Facebook and on Twitter. Thank you for supporting Politics. Okay, everybody, we're back. We have our special guest. This is a really cool interview for me because I always like talking to her. Every time I talk to her, I learn something. So this is State Representative Gina Hinojosa. Let me tell you about her. She is a third-term House member, but certainly is new to politics. Prior to serving in the legislature, I think she was elected for about 5 years to the Austin Independent School District as a board of trustee, as a trustee for the school district. She currently serves as the vice chair of human services. She is a lawyer. She's a mother. She does it all. She also does it all in the legislature. So Gina, welcome to the pod.
Thank you, Trey. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. No, you and I have a lot to talk about. And when I mean it when I say that you do it all, because I think I was talking to a member about 48 hours ago, and he was telling me what a critical role you played in sort of helping people communicate better along the border with the Biden administration. And, there was, as you know, this past week, a few days ago, there were a bunch of Republicans that actually, skipped work, virtually left Congress, went down to the border and were there to raise, a bunch of cane. And you were there on the ground helping people connect with the administration, setting up Zooms. And so this member was like, man, let me tell you my experience with Gina. Also, I'm like, where have you been, dude? I mean, that is my experience with her every day. She's always making.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, I'm a Valley girl. I'm originally from the border, so it pains me when I see people taking advantage of community I'm from and saying hurtful things about it. And so it was important to me to do what I could to help with that, with the messaging about what's happening there and what the reality is on the border.
No, well, that's awesome. But I was just like, after I let him talk, and of course, this member can talk, and I was like, where you been, dude? Like, you've been sleeping under a rock. This is exactly who Gina Hinojosa is. It's like somebody takes no prisoners, gets to work. You played a huge role in this quorum break, and I know that what I've learned about you in the time that I've known you is that you're about mission first, about taking care of business, and you don't care about credit, you don't care about acknowledgement, you just want to get the work done. But obviously, I think it's important for people to know the work that you did, because this stuff would be like, we might not have been able to pull it off. I mean, to be honest with you. And so take us back to that time. Let me set it up for the audience. I told somebody that, whenever there's a big fight or a battle scene going on, you always see the officers and the general on the top of the hill with the map, and they're sort of laying out the battlefield and the strategy. Then you have those generals on the ground actually fighting the war. Well, Rep. Hinojosa is one of those generals on the battlefield fighting the war. As we were maybe just a little over 24 hours we had to break a quorum, you were involved from the very first minute of the very first Zoom on that Saturday before our Sunday quorum break. Why don't you tell our listeners, what gave you the audacity, number one? Talk for a minute.
Well, yeah, we had a good plan. When I was angry, like we all were angry about how session had gone, about how session was ending, worse and worse still. And we had all along tried to negotiate in good faith, and unfortunately, the Republicans we were negotiating with weren't coming through. And so I was angry, like many of us were. But you don't want to just act out of anger, right? You want to have a game plan. And so, yeah, people always grouse about breaking quorum. Like every session I've been in, at some point people say, well, let's just go. But you don't do it because you got to know what is your end game. When you said to me, I know the end game. And you said to me, our end game is to break quorum, get on a plane, fly to Washington, and tell them to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I don't even know if at that point I knew about the For the People Act. We had been so immersed in the Texas legislature. I had heard about the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and you said it, and I said, yeah, that's awesome. That's excellent. So when you know what the end game is, and I also could read the room of the caucus and know that I wasn't the only one feeling this way, that the caucus wanted to stand up for ourselves and we wanted to not take it anymore as a caucus. And that was this general sentiment. And so when you know this is where your caucus wants to go, this is where your people want to go, when you know it makes sense, it's kind of, in my mind, easy to do the work to get from A to B. When you know where you're going.
Well, it wasn't just a matter of like knowing where you were going, what the sentiment of the caucus was. We actually had to pull it off, and I remember one of our very first conversations, many folks know I was part of the class of 2003 that broke quorum for a week and went to Ardmore, Oklahoma. We talked considerably about, well, wait a minute, let's not make any decisions. We need to know what kind of time are we dealing with? I mean, do we need a bus? Do we need a plane? Do we just need to hide in South Austin somewhere? I mean, let's figure out how much time we needed to kill. And when we learned that we were talking about maybe 5 or 6 hours, you had a really good idea. And why don't you tell our listeners about it?
Well, it was your idea. And it was the idea to get refuge at an African-American church, which made sense for two reasons. One, it made sense because the bill would have killed souls to the polls. Senate Bill 7 had a provision to ban early or all morning voting on Sundays, which would affect a tradition in African-American churches called souls to the polls, where congregants go to vote after services. And so the bill would have killed that. And also it would have been at least politically hard for DPS to round us up inside a church to take us back to the legislature. So for both those two reasons, it was good symbolism and maybe actually good safety to hide out in a church. And so you said, I got some people looking for an African-American church. I said, well, I can get you a church, and called Gary Bledsoe with the NAACP, longtime president of the NAACP. And I asked, can you get us a church? And in 15 minutes tops, he had me on the phone with a deacon who said, come on, y'all can come here.
No, that was pretty cool. That was a really great moment. As a matter of fact, at some juncture, I guess I had forgotten, the contacts you made. And I don't know, Gina, was like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night. And you're like, what do you want me to tell the deacon? I'm like, oh man, I forgot about the deacon. Like, yes, we're coming, so.
No, I had been talking with the poor deacon all day long. Are you coming? I don't know if we're coming, but can you wait for us? And he waited for us all day until we actually finally went over, like at close to 10 probably.
And the symbolism was important. Number one, I mean, there was the Souls of the Polls program, but number two, maybe just a few days prior to us breaking quorum, President Biden, in a national speech in Tulsa, Oklahoma, renewed the administration's commitment to voting rights, talked about, 30 days of action on voting rights, and chose to talk about it, on the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre. And so I think it just was very apropos for lots of reasons. And I think, everybody felt like that was a safe place. And so it was, again, I mean, I think all of this, the symbolism matters, and you were just you were key in making it happen. And so speaking of keys, I want to talk about what was in your pockets. We broke quorum, as you know, on a Sunday, and we came back on a Monday. And I understand you gained about 5 pounds, because of things you were carrying in your pocket. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, some people were so eager to leave that they left without their keys. And so they called me and say, hey, can you grab my key? I forgot my key. That was some. Other people had the keys. And we were like, let me make sure I have the keys just in case. So I went and rounded up keys, of course, with people's permission, because I wasn't going to take keys without their permission. But yeah, the next morning we had to vote on just, housekeeping matters in the house. And so somebody asked me for their keys, and I turned over my wallet, and all these keys fell onto my desk. And I said, I don't know how you know which is your key, but you're trying this one.
And so to be like really clear, every one of our desks on the House floor has a key that you can lock your voting machine or you can unlock it. And so when someone says they're taking their key, that means even though you're present, you can't vote. And so, of course, in breaking a quorum, the most critical thing you need is your key so that nobody can control your voting machine. And Gina was the person, that was in charge of making sure that when members left the floor, if they had taken their keys, and if they didn't take their keys, she would sneak down there like a CIA agent, try to be undetected and go to the floor and take a key. And so literally we could be sitting in a room looking at a record vote, and we'd see a member register in the vote that we knew had already broken quorum. And so literally someone would say, Gina, we need Rep so-and-so's key. And there she'd take off, and come back with the key. So that was a, moment I'll never forget. And again, we couldn't have broken quorum without you managing all those keys, and there were many keys.
Well, let me just say right back at you, we couldn't have broken quorum had you not seen the big picture and said, this needs to happen, this needs to happen. And just, I think your longtime experience in the House, having gone through a quorum break before, for those of us who are newer to this, we needed that kind of reassurance and guidance from you with your experience, to say, this makes sense to do this now, and this makes sense here. So, I mean, I just definitely, it all fell into place. Everybody played their part, but definitely couldn't have happened without your leadership.
Well, I think it was, listen, I think it was really the group. For that week, and for some members even earlier, this was painful policy. This wasn't a matter of, like we're Texas Democrats, we've been in the House, and I've been in the minority party since my second term. I've had one term in the majority. And so I know what it's like to lose, what it's like to lose. We don't win all our fights. This one was personal. This one was really going to just silence voices, and Republicans, in my view, were doing it for the worst reason possible, and that was because they could. And to me, that's the absolute worst time to adopt policy, when you're doing it just because you have the votes. And that's what this was about. So we needed a statement. Our caucus came together, particularly our caucus of Latino and African Americans. There were Asian Americans, and there were a lot of non-minorities too that wanted to break quorum. But it just sort of took, African Americans, Latinos coming together and just having that sort of family moment where we realized this was a number one issue for all of us, and it resonated back home, and we knew that we had to be bold and decisive. And so being bold and decisive, obviously put the attention the entire nation was paying attention to what was happening in Austin, Texas, and our state capital. And within days of us doing this, we find ourselves on the receiving end of invitations to come up to Washington, D.C. You were part of that delegation. It was bittersweet because this was something, I know I felt the same way. We wanted everybody to be there, but it happened fast. And invitations to the White House are not open-ended; they're very targeted. But you represented the state of Texas in our United States Capitol, both in the U.S. Senate, the U.S. House, and the White House. Why don't you tell us about what it felt like for you? What was your experience?
Well, it was, we were in our world of the action that we had taken, and living in our kind of Texas political bubble, if you will, to have been received with such kind of fanfare and open arms in the U.S. Capitol was pretty amazing. And I got the sense when we were meeting with senators, when we were meeting with House members, that they were as eager to talk to us, to be at a press conference with us, to take their pictures with us as we were with them. And they expressed to us pretty much universally that our action really was the shot in the arm that their effort to pass federal voting rights legislation needed, that we kind of reinvigorated the fight. And we were told repeatedly, don't stop, keep going. The vice president said to us, I know you're tired, but you're now federal voting rights leaders. So, we need you. And I think a lot of us took that to heart. I know I did. And so that's why we keep trying to focus attention on this issue, to keep up the fight, to keep up the profile on this issue.
I mean, we couldn't have been better received during this trip. And I think if there was, one article that sort of really captured everything for me, it was the article in the Dallas Morning News with your picture walking with Senator Amy Klobuchar, who chairs the Senate Rules Committee, which plays a major role in the debate for S1, the For the People Act. And you're walking with her, and the title of the article says Texans receive a hero's welcome. And that's what it felt like. And I also want our listeners and viewers to know that you had a very special seat at the White House. We met in the Roosevelt room of the White House, which is just steps away from the Oval Office. And in that room, there were about 16 of us or so, but you happened to be sitting to the left of the Vice President of the United States. I mean, what went through your mind when you saw that name card and you're going to be sitting right next to the Vice President of the United States?
Well, I was giddy. I had to kind of control myself and try to be serious about the meeting. It was very serious subject matter we were there to discuss, but I was so excited to be sitting next to the Vice President, and I was really appreciative of the way she engaged. Jessica Gonzalez, the Vice Chair of the Elections Committee, had an agenda, a tight agenda she was going to run for that meeting. It was totally thrown off because the Vice President had so many questions. It wasn't so engaging that we could not follow the agenda anymore. And I didn't anticipate that she would kind of be in there really kind of grappling with this with us. And so in that way, it really did feel like a substantive working meeting, exchange of ideas, not just kind of pro forma formality. No, it really did feel like a real meeting, working meeting with the Vice President. And so, yeah, I mean, there was a mix of giddiness and then also really understanding the seriousness of the moment and kind of and our moment in history with this fight. So it was a mix of feelings at the time.
No, and I remember, I mean, you were right. I mean, I found the Vice President to really just be on top of it. I mean, she knew exactly what we did. She knew how we did it. And the one thing that just really, just stayed with me is the fact that, she kept asking over and over again is to tell us about how African Americans, Latinos came together. And in fact, her words, tell me about this Black-Brown coalition,
right? And
how can we replicate this across the country, because this is what we need. And I mean, I left fired up. I know you left fired up. I happened to talk to Ms. Davis and Ms. Thompson as we exited the Roosevelt room, and you can really just see the energy and passion in just their expression and their voice, and really just sort of validated a decision that we made to say, listen, I mean, voting rights are important to everybody, but, just like any bad policy, though, there always seems to be a disproportionate impact on communities of color, whether you're talking about criminal justice or voting rights. And to have that acknowledgement from the Vice President of the United States as a minority, just, really made us feel like we were doing this for the right reasons. And she knew exactly why we were doing it. And I thought that was very, very, very just poetic in my view.
Yeah. And it reminded me, I think it evoked a feeling of pride amongst us. It reminded me that in our communities, in many of our communities, there's divisions between the Latino and African American communities. and that when we work together, how powerful we are. And so, I mean, I guess it hadn't dawned on me that we had really kind of bridged those differences that too often hold both our groups back, right? Hold all our communities back when we're divided that way. So, yeah, that just hearing that from her perspective drove home to me how powerful that coalition was.
No, you're right. I mean, but again, I mean, just this entire trip, I mean, one thing that Representative Armando Martinez goes over and over again, just again, how engaged our national leaders were with us, how sincere and committed. He keeps saying over and over again, he was so impressed that not only did Speaker Pelosi, come to our press conference, which was outside the Capitol, and what I now know and what you probably already knew is just how difficult it is to navigate inside and outside that U.S. Capitol after this insurrection. But not only did she come outside and attend and speak at our press conference, she stayed for the whole thing. And because she wanted to know exactly what we were going to say, wanted to be supportive. Same thing with Leader Schumer, expanded the room to bring everybody in, spent, I guess at least 45 minutes, if not an hour with us, talking in great detail what he was hoping or anticipating what was going to happen, what was the game plan, what are the next steps. And then of course, just being at that White House in that moment, I mean, said to me that this was important. And so let's go forward a bit. I mean, we have the run up from our trip to Washington, and there's a big vote coming up. But then you get a call to go to West Virginia. What was that about?
I got a call from another member who had been in touch with the Texas Organizing Project, and they had been in touch with the New Georgia Project, which mobilizes voters in Georgia. It was the Stacey Abrams group that helped and was so instrumental in their last election. So they wanted me to come and tell the Texas story. They were doing a freedom ride and going through the South and retracing the stops of the freedom ride 50 years ago, and were landing in West Virginia before moving on to DC. And they asked if I would meet them in West Virginia, where Senator Manchin represents, since he is such a key vote in the vote to pass the For the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He's a Democrat from West Virginia, and he is one of two Senate Democrats who we need to support breaking the filibuster to pass these bills. And so there was a voting rights rally there where the bus stopped, and it was great. I got to tell the story of Texas and engage with a lot of people involved in politics in West Virginia, heard from them that our visit mattered, that they had heard. They asked me, were you one of the reps in the meeting with the staff for Senator Manchin? And I said, no, I didn't get to be in that meeting. And I said, because we hear that meeting really made a difference. And so I know you were in that meeting, Trey, and I heard from you as well that was an important, you felt like that was an impactful meeting, but I was hearing that from within his community. And so to get that perspective drove home for me how important our work was. And I also learned that the Friday after we left, the West Virginia AFL-CIO came out in support of the For the People Act. And that is his base, Manchin's base of support. So it was really a big deal. So yeah, it was great to be in that community, to engage with that community, tell them how we and the rest of the country needed their leadership in West Virginia needed their senator to act.
Wow, well, just like how all that came together, we had Rep. Crockett on the show last week, and of course, she attended the meeting with Senator Manchin's office along with me, and every single deal point that Senator Manchin released the very next day, we had discussed, blow by blow in the office. And I think really, I mean, again, when you look at voting laws for the state of West Virginia, I mean, I said this yesterday in an interview. I mean, that would be a dream to have that kind of policy in Texas. And I think it was just really at that point, sort of the reflection about, well, maybe it is, really bad in other places, and we shouldn't just be thinking about our West Virginia standard and ignore the rest of the country, because in some areas, voting is much more difficult. And so that's our experience here in Texas. And of course, very, very recently, it seems to be the experience in the state of Arizona. And so let's do this. Let me combine two topics in the interest of time. I mean, we're going back in session next week on the 8th of July. And in light of that, I mean, we know that we're going to be dealing with voting suppression legislation. But just a couple of days ago, the United States Supreme Court just issued a decision in an Arizona voting rights case that essentially, is being characterized as the gutting of Section 2, which is really the only viable tool we have left in the Voting Rights Act, and pretty much, held in Arizona that it's okay to, if you hurt some people in their right to vote, especially when they have other options as to how they can vote. So this dealt with how mail ballots were handled, and this also dealt with provisional ballots that were cast in somebody else's precinct, not their home precinct. What's going through your mind right now as you prepare for session? What do you think or anticipate, is going to happen?
Well, we all got a taste of our power as Democrats at the end of last session. And so what's going through my mind is making sure that we play to win. Now, the ball is in the governor's court. We don't know anything that's on the call because he has not yet issued a call for July 8th. And so we don't know quite yet what is our play. And so we're all waiting for him to act. But I'm as determined as ever to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that a voter suppression bill does not pass. The way I see what Republicans did with SB 7 is they had this far right agenda they passed during this last legislative session. In 6 months, they essentially banned abortion. They passed permitless carry. They criminalized homelessness. They defunded cities that shifted their budget from law enforcement. I mean, it just goes on and on. So they did all that. And then at the end, so we can't hold them accountable, they're trying to make it hard for us to vote because they know that their agenda that they pass is not popular with the masses, not popular with Texans. It's popular with their right-wing base. So they got to make it hard for the rest of us to vote. And so we need to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's why I'm as committed as ever. I know all Democrats in the Texas legislature are committed to making sure that we do whatever it takes to stop voter suppression bill from passing.
No, I agree with you. That sentiment is dead on. Look, we're a big Democratic family. We have rural Democrats, urban Democrats, folks in conservative districts, folks that are on the verge of losing their reelection because of their districts. And so we rarely, have unanimity on any one issue. And on this issue of the quorum break, I would just characterize that we had folks that were hot, folks that were warm, and folks that were cold. I can tell you now, I mean, everybody's hot, right? Everybody knows. And that to me, I mean, we have, lobbyists, reporters, all kinds of activists listening to this pod. That's the one thing I'd warn Republicans about is like, you have now rallied the Democrats, and our resolve is tougher than ever.
Right.
You're united. And so listen, we'll hit the ground running. We're going to play to win. And really, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we want our constituents to know that it's really not about us on that floor. It is about you all and how we preserve our democracy. We just celebrated the 4th of July, and I told everybody that I talked to that we just don't celebrate our democracy, we fight for it. And that's exactly sort of the attitude I'm taking with me next week. I know that you're right there. You're actually in front of me because I know how your passion runs. But listen, I think this is all we have time for. But Rep. Gina Hinojosa, thank you so much. Thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you for being that constant, fire, that's at everybody's feet to get us to understand the big picture and to move. And I think your constituents really need to know. I know they know, but they just need to know from someone like me just how hard you work for them, and how you're working every day to improve our state. So, look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you for
All right.
joining the show. Okay, that about wraps it up. I want to thank my special guest, Gina Hinojosa, for coming on the show. Again, send your ideas and your suggestions. Keep following us on social media, TMFTX on both Facebook and Twitter. Enjoy your week, and we'll get back to you next week on Politex.